Welcome in on a Tuesday here in New York City. Evan and Tiki on the Fan. A lot to get to today. How Jeff Ulbrich is making things worse for the New York Jets. The Juan Soto sweepstakes are coming into focus on who, as Met and Yankee fans, you have to watch out for. And we will play the good coach game to determine if Brian Daboll has any future with the New York Football Giants. But in about an hour, Joe Schoen, for the first time since training camp, is going to use words into a microphone. And we, as football fans and as Giant fans, are going to get to hear what this man has to say. He is the architect of a football team that right now is 2-8. A football team that is tied for the worst record in the NFL and may well have the number one pick. And I think Joe Schoen is in a very, 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 very tough spot. Because when he meets the media at 3 o'clock, something you will hear live right here on WFAN, you'll get to hear what Joe has to say. What could he possibly say to Tiki Barber or Sean Morash or any other Giant fan to make them feel better about the garbage we're watching every Sunday?
It's going to be hard, I got to tell you, because, I mean, you're 2-8 right now, and not that there was an expectation like with the Jets this year for the New York Giants, but there was an expectation that you would win more games than you're losing, and you wouldn't feel inept at certain moments. And Daniel Jones would be more like the 2022 Daniel Jones and the 2023 Daniel Jones, and that the offensive line wouldn't be an issue any longer, that these young players that you drafted would be ballers and not taking days or plays off. Like, you thought all of these things were going to be trending towards, success. And it's just not. And even if there are signs, because there are signs, and I'll always go back to Tyrone Tracy because nobody thought that he would be this player, being drafted as late as he was, and as a running back who converted from wide receiver, he's a really good player. So there's some good players on this team, but the overall scope of the New York Giants is not a positive one, and Joe Schoen's going to be put to the task on it.
Yeah, to me, there is only one thing in the short term that's going to make Giant fans happy. Only one thing. Because you can't change the results.
No.
You can't change 2-8, and you can't change what we've watched. So the only thing he could say is, hey, everybody, we're done with Daniel Jones. That's it. And I don't necessarily
He won't say it that callously.
Well, he may not say it that callously, and he may not even say it at all. But I honestly think that is the thing in the moment on November 12th. That's the only thing that right now is going to make the Giant fan say, oh, okay, I feel better moving forward. And it's not a quick fix. It doesn't mean Tommy DeVito or Drew Lock comes in and they win every game and they go on this fantastic run. But I think the Giant fan has seen enough.
Yeah, but I think that doesn't get said today. I know it will be asked 15 different ways by the beat reporters that are at this conference or press conference, because I think this is live. It's live. It's in person. It's not over Zoom. We're taking it via the Giants website and YouTube. And so people are going to be there to look at Joe Schoen and ask these questions and ask him how many times to Sunday, what are you doing with Daniel Jones? Or what's the plan with Daniel Jones? But I think that's going to be reserved for Dabes to give that response, give that answer.
You're right
and
that
it
Dabes
probably won't happen until a week from now.
So Dabes is the one who will officially say it because he's the head coach. He's going to announce who's starting. But Joe Schoen is responsible for keeping Daniel Jones. He's responsible for deciding to extend Daniel Jones. He's the one who decided, you know what? I saw enough in that 1 year with him where I want to get remarried to Daniel Jones. And I think, to me, you tell me if I'm wrong, Sean, as a Giant fan, to me, that's the number one thing on the Giant fans' minds in this moment.
Yeah, there is a
kill him off for good.
There is a debatable narrative going around, Giants fans and media, which is by signing Daniel Jones to this contract, Joe Schoen did pick his quarterback, and that maybe he doesn't deserve the right to pick a quarterback. So by giving him this contract, I think it's fair to ask. And by the way, he was very candid on Hard Knocks with those live microphones, right? What do we hear specifically about the Barkley stuff, right? I'm not paying a quarterback $40 million to hand it off to a $20 million running back. So I think the question needs to be asked, do you feel like you've got your money's worth out of Daniel Jones? And I don't think there's anything prohibiting.
Well, by the way, that's a loaded question because you can't say yes. He's been awful since the
I actually think that's an easy question, John, because you say no. out.
Clearly.
Right.
Because he missed an entire season, or
Yes.
most of an entire season, and they've won 2 games so far. So the answer, if that question is asked, is easily no, we haven't.
Right.
But it's not all Daniel Jones' fault.
Right, and there's a way to answer it without throwing him completely under the bus, but saying, hey, he has not lived up to the expectations. We gave him the money. We feel like we've surrounded him with parts. Now, maybe I haven't done a good enough job of completing that.
Right.
But ultimately, this is not what we expected when we signed Daniel Jones. And I think, by the way, the fan base lays over and goes, I have a GM that's not clueless. Now, he's
Right. I mean,
the
the last thing you can do is lie about that. The last thing you can do is make it sound like it's better than it actually is, because we see it with our own eyes.
Right.
Like we can evaluate it with our own, I don't know, rewinds of games, or even just opinions from those that know what they're talking about, even those that don't know what they're talking about. Daniel Jones hasn't been good, right? And the Giants are 2-8 because of it. So you can't say that you've got your money's worth. So I think in this case, being honest about it, even if it does hurt the feelings of your current starting quarterback, is worth it.
Well, I don't even think it's about hurting Daniel Jones's feelings. I think it's about owning your mistake, because you are the general manager that decided to remarry him. You're the general manager that decided to extend him.
See, the problem is I can't go back to that, because they had no choice. They didn't have a choice. They had a really good season out of Daniel Jones. We've talked about this many times. They were way too low to move up in the draft, especially because they didn't have partners that were going to trade with them. And there was no free agent that was better than Daniel Jones on paper.
Right.
And so, they were stuck. It sucks for them, because clearly they didn't want to have to go all in for Daniel Jones for 4 years. In fact, they didn't. They went in for 2 out of a 4-year contract. But they didn't have good options.
Yeah,
and so the best option, and I could go back and look at this 1,000 times, I would still say the best option in that moment was Daniel Jones.
Well, here's the other thing that I also think is very, very important, okay? Because over the last few weeks, the narrative from angry Giant fans has been not only to blame Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, but blame ownership.
Yes.
And say this is ownership's fault. Well, here's an important question for Joe Schoen, and I'll give you my opinion and certainly your opinion on this. And that is, hey, Joe, when you made the decision to remarry Daniel Jones, you talked about the other options, was that forced upon you from ownership?
Yeah.
Because all the evidence is there that that's not what happened.
No, it's not.
So when I kill ownership, like I use Woody Johnson as an example, I'm mad at Woody Johnson. And I'll tell you the main reason why I'm mad at Woody Johnson.
Because he fired his coach without consulting anybody?
Correct. Thank you, Teague. I'm mad at Woody Johnson because the owner, while he has every right to do it, you own the team, it's your toy, you have every right to do it, stepped on his GM's toes and said, I'm firing the head coach. I have a problem with that. There is a narrative that I'm not fully buying, mainly because there's just not evidence to back it up, that John Mara forced Daniel Jones on Joe Schoen.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, A, it's not backed up in any fact, and B, what you're doing, if you don't even realize it, is you're making excuses for Joe Schoen. There's no way. And tell me if I'm crazy here. When John Mara decided to break away from the family and hire someone outside of the Giant organization, and they interviewed Joe Schoen, very highly regarded out of Buffalo. And they interviewed Brian Daboll, but first it was Schoen, technically. Do you think, let's just use logic here, do you think Joe Schoen was leaving Buffalo to take a job where he's being told by the owner to keep the mediocre quarterback? No way.
No chance.
I don't buy it. What happened was Joe Schoen took over, evaluated, and said, look, let me just play this schlump for a year. He's going to probably suck. We'll move on. I'll draft my own quarterback, and that's it. And then
they messed around and had a good 2022.
They had a great 2022. Now the circumstances were, well, he had a good year.
Right.
Do we let him go? Do we tag him? So I think what needs to be addressed, because there's still a lot of Giant fans who feel this way, and I think I'm an IFO in this. I mean, you have a relationship with him, so I could see you being like, hey, I know more, and maybe you do. I don't see any evidence that John Mara is woodying the situation.
Well, I think we've seen the evidence just from the Hard Knocks stuff where he has an opinion. Right? The whole family has an opinion because they're all involved in some capacity, whether it's Chris or Susan or whoever. They're all involved. But he lets Joe Schoen do his job.
Because he let Saquon Barkley go to Philadelphia.
And he said, I'm going to not sleep well if Saquon Barkley's in a green uniform. Guess what? He's not sleeping well. But he let Joe Schoen make that decision. So I got to believe it's been that way for the Daniel Jones decision as well. The other thing I think we're forgetting about Daniel Jones, or maybe the other thing that maybe Joe Schoen could have done is have been really callous with him. And so, yes, Daniel Jones, you had a great season in 2022. You got us to a playoff game. You won a game in Minnesota on the road. We want to reward you, but we still need to see it. We're going to Kirk Cousins you.
Yeah.
We're going to franchise you.
That was the best option.
And we're going to franchise you again.
Yes.
And we're going to franchise you again.
Yes.
And so that would have been the way to handle it.
Because then you could have moved on after one bad year instead of being married to another
choice
year.
Does Daniel Jones have?
No, I get you.
None at that point.
I completely get it. Just what boggles my mind, and Shane's going to be asked about this because Brian Daboll was asked about it 2 days ago. He was asked, when you make a quarterback change, do you have to run it by ownership? Now, I'll be with you on this. If ownership is overriding a quarterback, and forget Eli, because that's a different situation. So the Eli Manning, Ben McAdoo thing, I throw away because I think that's different when you're talking
and
about.
I also think it was Eli.
Well, it's just a different circumstance when you're dealing with a Hall of Fame quarterback and there's bedside manner in when you bench him. I think it's different than benching Daniel Jones.
I think we need, if you're going to bring that up, you have to realize what actually happened.
What actually happened?
They wanted to get some looks to Geno Smith.
Right.
And Eli said, if you're going to play him, just start him.
Right.
Right? Don't do that to me. And so basically Eli said, I'm going to bench myself because I'm not letting you disrespect me.
I don't want to be sat in like the third quarter of the game.
Right. Because that's BS.
Right. Because he had that streak.
Exactly. He had that streak. So you're going to just start me so I can keep my streak? You know what? Screw you. That's basically what happened.
No, it makes sense because it makes your streak kind of look hollow when you're just playing to keep a streak alive.
Right. We remember we had Geno a couple weeks ago. We had the Giants Seattle game.
Right.
And we asked Geno about that moment. He said Eli was the one that actually told me.
Wow.
So it's kind of crazy.
Yeah. But I don't think like in that
it wasn't as strifeful as it was made out to be on the inside.
But if you're benching, and I get it, it went kind of the opposite way in that they didn't bench Eli. Eli benched himself. I understand going to ownership and asking permission if it got to that because it's Eli Manning. It's different.
Right.
If you're telling me that the owner is saying I need to approve every move, such as who's playing and who's not playing, then I would agree with you and say that's a little too much. I don't want my owner doing that. No. Owner has a right to do it. I wouldn't like it. But I don't see.
Yeah, only Jerry does that.
And by the way, we would hate it. We wouldn't like something like that. So I think it should be up to Brian Daboll on who the quarterback is, but I don't see any evidence other than Giant fans kind of saying it as fan fiction that this owner is literally interfering with what they do day to day.
I agree. I've heard it for years, and it's nonsense because that's not what he does. It's not his personality.
Now, he offers his opinion, and I'll tell you this, and this is a dangerous slope. I'll admit this watching Hard Knocks. It is dangerous. It's like a president, right? A president basically says to somebody who works in their administration, nudging them, I really want you to do this. I really want you to do this. I really want you to do this. It's almost like they're telling you to do something without telling you to do something. So I understand if the owner, your boss, it's like the architect coming in here and nudging us and saying, opening with the Mets would be a pretty good idea. The Mets, let's talk Mets today at 2:05. It's like a nudge from the boss. Now, ultimately, you make your own decision. So I can see being pressured to make a move because the owner is telling you, boy, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night if I lost Saquon. So I can see that, but they didn't keep Saquon.
I know.
So obviously, if you thought there was pressure being applied, it didn't work. The GM didn't listen. So to me, this mess that the Giants are in is on Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. And the only thing that John Mara deserves criticism for, if you're mad at Schoen and Daboll, is hiring Schoen and Daboll.
Right.
Because to me, it appears like they've been given all the tools and authority to do what they want. If they turn out not to be the right guys, then, okay, you hired the wrong guy.
Right.
But I don't see evidence that Daniel needs to stay. Daniel needs to be extended.
The meddling isn't there.
I don't see any evidence of it.
But people want to say it just because it's the easy, lazy way to evaluate an organization. By starting at the top and then blaming everybody all the way down. That's what people do, even though that's not actually how it works. And so it's unfair to John and to the Tisch family because they're not involved in that regard, right? They're owners. They understand the outcome and they understand the fan frustration because guess what? You ask him this question when we sat down with him at the beginning of the season. He's a fan like you are.
Right.
He gets his, not you with the Jets. You with the Jets.
No, as a fan, I get
He's
you.
a fan. he wants the success. Not like he's trying to have a horrible product on the field. He wants it to be successful.
Look,
but he also knows that he hires people to do that job.
And that's where the criticism is fair.
Yes.
On who you hire. Like, if you hire somebody, you give them full authority. Like, I'll give you a Nick example, because Dolan takes so much crap. It's my understanding that Dolan has been meddling in the past, but he hired Phil Jackson and said, Phil, it's your show.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm using Phil for a reason, because it didn't work, right? Hires Phil, this is your show. Don't we all believe Phil Jackson had the full authority to do whatever the hell he wanted?
Yeah.
And so that was on Phil. Where you can blame Dolan was you hired the wrong person.
Right. You hired a guy who wasn't fully bought in.
Yes.
He was half the time flying back out to California to see his girlfriend.
Yeah, right.
Then they broke up, and then he got despondent and started smoking weed and said, I'm done.
Yeah, it's a little different than the Giants situation, but that's where the criticism is fair. If this fails and Schoen and Daboll are gone at the end of the season or the end of next season, yes, it falls on the Marin Tisch family for hiring the wrong person, no doubt. But I don't see any evidence, and I'm open to evidence. I really am. I don't see any evidence that Schoen and Daboll are being affected or pressured on these decisions. These are their decisions. They have to own these decisions. The Daniel Jones thing, Teak, you laid it out, was complicated. I admit it, because of the fact they inherited him in a draft in which, remember what Joe Schoen did in his first draft? You guys remember? Drafted Evan Neal, right? Mm-hmm. Is that what he did?
Yep.
Is it Evan Neal? What was the first quarterback taken in that draft? In case Joe Schoen wanted to right away say, I want to bring in my own quarterback. Does anybody remember? Do you remember, Sean?
I don't. But remember, Evan Neal wasn't his first pick either.
I apologize. What year was Evan Neal? 2023?
Yeah, but Kayvon Thibodeau was his first pick.
Okay, so 2020. Right, so you're just playing a technicality with it.
Yes, I'm just saying.
He was also a first rounder, but yes.
Yes,
that was his first
pick.
Right.
Yes.
That was his first draft in 2022, correct? Okay?
Yes. Oh, I know.
What was the first? So if for anyone who said, hey, he has a chance to just pick his own quarterback, it's his first draft, and he's got 2 high picks. Go ahead, Sean.
Kenny Pickett?
Correct, Kenny Pickett.
Yes, I got it right.
So here's the moral of the
That
story.
was one of those rare drafts where there was not a quarterback worth taking.
Correct.
Malik Willis was the other big one, right?
Malik Willis.
So
Actually, he's a pretty good backup.
So the reason
Won some
why
games in Green Bay.
The reason why Daniel Jones lasted into the Schoen and Daboll administration, again, I'm just following the evidence here, is not a pressure campaign from the owner who says you better employ him. It's because Kenny Pickett was the best quarterback option. If he had inherited the Giants in a different year, in a different draft, you can mark my words, Daniel Jones's ass would have been on a train somewhere else.
Right.
He wasn't having to stay. It's the situation sucked.
You know what? I actually come up with a good question here for Joe Schoen at his press conference today. Do you regret doing Hard Knocks? Because I think the Giants come off awful on that show.
Can I tell you why I disagree with you?
Okay.
What I've said to you as we've discussed the Joe Schoen thing and the John Mara thing, I believe that little story of Saquon and Mara's comments and the actions help me, or at least tell me, that John isn't interfering with day-to-day.
I agree.
If that didn't happen, Tiki and I would be having an awkward conversation because I'd be like, Tiki, I think he's interfering.
And I'd
you'd
be
say he's
screaming
not.
Because I would know the answer, and you'd be saying, no, he is.
No, I'd be speculating.
But now you've seen it.
I
By the way,
saw it, so it actually helped me say he's not.
Desmond Ridder was the other quarterback in that draft.
Oof. And what does that tell you?
Exactly.
So ask yourself this.
You couldn't draft anybody.
Were the Giants, was Joe Schoen literally told you have to keep Daniel Jones, or did he look around and say, gee, let me just run it out with this guy and see what we got?
And speaking of Daniel Jones,
That's what I meant. There was no good options. There weren't good options.
that year, and go back to this last draft where we have video evidence of him trying to trade up for Jaden Daniels and Drake May, and simply teams wanting to stay put. He could have taken J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix. He didn't. He could have taken Kenny Pickett. He didn't. And you know why he didn't? Because that's exactly how a franchise ends up with Daniel Jones 2.0, taking a quarterback you don't believe
But you
in.
think actively filming that and airing that so everybody could see it, including the quarterback, is a smart thing to do? They didn't get Daniels. They didn't get May. I think Joe Schoen came off so badly on Hard Knocks. I'm sorry. It was just like a gut feel watching him. I'm like, this guy doesn't seem like he's competent.
What comes across badly to me is 2-8. That's what comes across badly. If they were 8-2, I think we'd be looking back at everything completely different. I think the Hard Knocks thing was educational. I don't think it's had any impact on the winning or losing. And I think right now, when your team sucks, when your team is terrible, and the Giants suck, like, let's just all admit it.
Right.
You want to do it together? 1, 2, 3, Giants suck?
Giants stink.
Giants suck. Giants suck. Boy, Schoen won't do it.
I can't do it. That's my team.
Tiki just said Giants stink. He's a legend. He just said it.
All right. They stink. They don't suck.
Right.
Oh, suck is the problem?
Yeah.
What the hell's the difference?
It's just less.
It's a harsher version of stink.
harsh. Yes.
Boy, you guys are sweet.
They stink on the field. They don't suck as an organization.
All right.
The Giants suck.
Thank you, Aaron, for helping us out.
Oh, God.
Yes. Anyhow, we'll get to your calls. Joe Shane's going to meet the media coming up in 40 minutes. You will get to hear it live here on WFAN. So you'll hear everything he has to say, and then we'll find out if it makes you feel better or not. Plus, Jet fans, you should feel even more miserable than you thought. We'll explain why as the show rolls on, and we'll take your calls at 888-808-1019.